All right, everybody. There's few of you here. We're right on time. We have a interesting conversation to happen today. There's not much in the way of presentation other than the questions I'm going to have. My name is Adam Asnes. I'll introduce our guests in a moment. Um, Before we get going, a couple of pointers. Of course, we've all been using Zoom for a long time now. But I want to point people's attention to the Q&A button. I know there are always, we really love questions that the audience has. So if you could use that Q&A button to ask questions. We're also on LinkedIn Live. I am not looking at the LinkedIn Live interface. I probably have a preference that people ask questions via Zoom. But Kate, who is, kind of not on the screen, is monitoring LinkedIn Live, and she'll feed questions that come in there from there to me. And then we'll go from that. First things first, because it always comes up as the first question. Yes, we are recording this. And yes, we will provide the recording. Kate, I'm assuming you hit the recording button, and if not,
Yes, it's good. Yeah.
Okay, see, mysterious voice. Um, but we should be good to go. All right, with that, we're going to talk about an interesting subject, what we're calling, there isn't really a name for this, but I decided to just call it hyperlocalization. That's when you have a lot of languages. And we've really seen a change in our own clientele over the years, going from like, hey, we're going to support, what was the acronyms? FIGS and maybe CJK.
Adam, I'm sorry. You are on the wrong slide right now. Can you please go back
Yeah,
to the
sure,
first slide on the presentation? Sorry.
sure. Thanks for the hint. There we go. So again, we used to talk about CJK, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and FIGS, French, Italian, German, Spanish. I never hear those terms anymore, which is great. Most companies have gone quite a bit beyond when you localize. And again, as long as you have the infrastructure to do that, both with software, that's a matter of character set support, locale support, and the like, which is a whole nother issue that I've talked lots about, then why not? It's a matter of management and expense and systematic abilities that many companies struggle with. But once you have that in place, you can go to a lot of places. So with that, I'm going to introduce my guests here. We have Andy Andersen here. Andy is coming to us from his, I'm guessing it's your Airbnb in Turkey right now?
Yep, exactly. Hotel.
Andy's a world traveler and he does his work while he's traveling, which is super cool. And we have Elizabeth Plaza. Elizabeth is coming to us from New Jersey. Respectively, Andy is at Brave, a software browser, and Elizabeth works for Medidata, which works on medical-related applications. She's part of Dassault, which is a very large conglomerate. We're talking about a very large organization, and Brave is, large enough, but it's a different order of magnitude. I doubt, I didn't check, but I'm sure Brave is not publicly traded. No.
No, Brave isn't a public company, privately owned. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and actually, Dassault, I'm not sure of either, but in any case, we're going to talk about how they work. Andy's Brave currently is at 50 plus languages. Elizabeth's group is at 100 plus languages, so lots of locales. Andy has worked in over 100 language, or is it languages or locales? That's another discussion.
Yeah, it is another discussion. Yeah.
But they have quite a bit to talk about here. So we're going to get into it with a bunch of questions, and then we're going to take audience questions. Again, use the Q&A interface. That makes it easier for me to look in one place. All right, with that, here is the first one. How does product development impact localization? So Andy, I'm going to pick on you first because
Cool.
you're double.
Yeah, so I think when you develop the product, I think you really need to focus on who you're building the product for, right? That's the thing we always come back to, and having the infrastructure, having the things you need in place to do localization. There needs to be a symbiotic relationship between the localization efforts of the company, the production of everything that you're doing, and so product development and localization, I kind of link them together. Normally, I don't really separate. I know historically in our industry. We talked about localization as being kind of a self-service part of the company and like wing. But I think what I've really pushed for in our industry is localization is a lot more about international product. And so that's what I kind of use the term a lot. International product growth is something that I push because localization is so uniquely integrated into every aspect of the business. It's not really something that fits into one discipline. It's very cross-functional, and it's something that really needs to be considered at many different levels, from the marketing channels to the rollout, like new product rollouts, to just the weekly, bi-weekly, monthly strings, whatever the products you're working on, to anything else. So there's definitely a need for it to be an integral part of the process, and it depends on the stage of the company, as we may get into a little bit today, but every company does it a little bit differently. But I think it should be intertwined, and it should be a fundamental part, because it is really the base of international product growth, and it is something that people can build off of. And when you have a really good foundation, as you mentioned in the opening, you don't necessarily just have to do a handful of languages that companies traditionally did. You can get into a lot more markets now, and really potentially propel the growth of your business overall. And so it's that's kind of the way that I would look at it from a product development perspective.
Okay, let me pick on you, Elizabeth.
Well, I'll kind of speak to it from like the perspective of the software development process. So, as Adam mentioned, our company, we develop software for the life sciences industry, and historically, localization was kind of an afterthought. So we're like at the end of the development stage, and they usually would come to us, maybe a month prior to like soft code freeze, saying, hey, we have all these strings, we just need them localized and get it back to us as quick as possible. And of course, with that, there's tons of potential issues that can come up. In some instances, if the code isn't even globally ready, then there's issues that come up with that. And so what we've done over the past few years is tried to put an emphasis on ensuring that like the development teams are thinking about localization when they're writing the code, and ensuring that their code has global readiness incorporated into it. And so what we've also done is officially incorporated global readiness into our software development lifecycle. So now it's a priority, or it's an imperative for our software teams to ensure that when they're writing code, they're thinking about globalization and those factors. And so with that, we've started to kind of see a turn in our process. And of course, partnering with our translation vendor, we've been able to kind of make our process more efficient. And the issues have pretty much decreased from that standpoint. And we've also put an emphasis on context as well. So with the development teams coming to us late in the process, they usually it's a rushed effort. And so, but however, we need time to be able to review what's being provided to us, ensuring that our translators understand the context of what we're given, and then ensuring that the translations are done accordingly. So I would say emphasizing global readiness early in the code process would definitely be a good thing to incorporate.
So I'm going to hit you with a question we didn't discuss ahead of time.
Okay.
And that is, are you able to, kind of push your way in so that localization considerations are part of the PRD, the product requirements documentation? So super early.
Yeah. So what we've done is, because we of course have a ton of SOPs that our developers have to kind of stick to. So we've incorporated global readiness into the software development lifecycle SOP. And so I believe, and I would have to pull it up. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but
Okay.
where it's incorporated is early in the process. I don't know if it's that early.
Okay.
But like I said, I would have to confirm. But we
Well,
definitely like pushed it up so that it's
Yeah.
considered
yeah.
even when
And
they're thinking about the design of the product.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
we'll visit Figma design later,
Yeah.
I can
but even earlier than that is the PRD. But go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
Yeah, just to add to what Elizabeth is saying, I think that that's something that we've done a good bit of too, is trying to the way that I look at it is it's trying to get as many eyeballs on this concept of thinking about things ahead of time and thinking about localization as a requirement. And so whether it's from the design perspective, whether it's from the engineering perspective, whatever part of the business, making sure that on the docs, on the specs, on the the design checklists, on the final code reviews, like as many touch points as you can. Like, did you consider language? Have you tested this in different languages? Like whatever, all these things. And some of them might not stick, but as long as you just continue to repeat the same messages, it's something that it requires kind of a concerted effort, and probably something that I think should be revisited on some kind of cadence, whether it's every couple of months or something, where you do a road show, or you speak with people, or you ping people and say, hey, just FYI, don't forget, this kind of thing. So yeah, we've done a fair bit of that as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. All right, let's go to question 2. Uh, every time I say thanks, guys, I remember I'm from New York City, and in New York, guys is like men and women. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no, it's the same. I'm from some close by, so I get it.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. How do you choose linguistic partners? Are you working with localization agencies, or individual contractors, or a mix? It's a lot of languages.
Yeah. Should I start? Yeah.
Sure.
So I think this is an interesting one, because I'm sure I'm interested to hear how, like what Elizabeth's side as well, with more than 100 languages, because sometimes it's difficult to have one team cover everything. But I think, with agencies, the agency game has started to evolve a lot in the last couple of years, and I think it's gotten to an interesting point, especially when we're talking about this kind of hyper localization concept of supporting a lot more languages than maybe we did historically, because not all of those languages are going to require the same amount of attention to detail maybe as some of your kind of top business languages, and the top business languages might not be the same for every single company. What we've done at Brave, and what I've done at previous companies, has been to look for basically partnership and long-term kind of mindset from any linguistic partner. So from a localization agency is like looking for a partner and getting them to think as much about the long term as possible, of saying, like, when you're successful, we're successful, and vice versa. It's kind of a two-way street, was we help each other, in the sense that the more successful and the more high quality our localization efforts are, the more theoretically we can grow as a business in that market, or in those regions, which enables us to give more business kind of in turn back to the agency. And so I've looked for that with agencies, working primarily with one agency right now. But for a couple of markets that we have focused on, I've actually got an individual as well, an individual contractor working to give an extra attention to detail for those, where we can really craft not only the messaging, but just focus on style, focus on the overall of the language, and think about it kind of as a holistic concept, like one language market or something. So, yeah.
Got it. Elizabeth?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been working with the same agency partner for I think about 9 years now. So they've kind of grown with us, because I'm sure initially when we signed on, and I wasn't in this role at that time, we weren't nearly as close to the amount of languages that we that we localize in now. So they've definitely grown with us. And of course, it was important that they had expertise in the life sciences area, because there are very like stringent like requirements in that industry that it was important for our vendor or whoever we're working with to fully understand that, so that they can accommodate that for us. So yeah, we haven't changed in a while, so I haven't really been a part of having to decide, on a new partner or agency. But they provide us with all of the translators and any other contractors or any services that we need are all provided through our vendor. So they're heavily involved. We work together on a very consistent basis, ensuring that they're up to date on any changes within our products, any new products coming out, ensuring that we have them fully trained. They get a product walkthrough so that when it's time to actually do the translations, they already have had that background and understand the product to a certain degree. So those were definitely important components when working with them.
Hope you don't mind, but I'm going to give them a plug. That vendor is Vistatech, and we
Yes,
like working with them
tech.
too.
They're great. They're awesome.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
I, something that stands out to me is that, and this is really a follow-on that's directed towards any vendor side people attending this webinar. Neither one of them mentioned price. Price always counts, but whenever I have these conversations with people on your side of it, on the client side, it's usually not the first thing they bring up. As a matter of fact, they never bring it up. So in line with what you're saying, with your answers.
Yeah.
Have you experienced a lot of price pressure in your roles?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We receive pressure every year, so we're always trying to look at ways where we can save and make our
Right.
processes more efficient and decrease, the amount of like rework that has to be done. So over the years, we've definitely tried to incorporate processes to help with that. And of course, one of those is bringing on the Lingoport suite. So that's helped a ton with automation, which saves a ton of time on our end, which then in turn saves money. So yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Andy, anything to add to that?
Yeah, the pricing question is interesting. I think, if we all went back 10 years, it was obviously there was the standard per word rate or hourly rate or something like that. And obviously that model is evolving now with a lot of changes in the industry. We do, get some pressure for cost reductions currently for what we're working on. But in general, yeah, I have had that come up a lot. But, I was on a call a while back with someone who was curious about the industry, and they were asking me, how much they thought, or how much I thought AI would impact or translation, how much can we do with machine translation and all of these topics. And I was saying, in terms of cost reduction and everything, I was just saying, like, kind of doing a hypothetical math example, and I explained to them, even if a big company, I don't know what the budget of every big company would be, but if you say maybe a couple 100,000 or whatever a large company might be spending, potentially on
Yeah.
localization. What's that?
Millions.
Yeah, millions potentially. But if you look at that and you say, how much would AI reduce it for an app or something like that, for a company like an app company, the math, even if you reduced it by like 30% for an average app, you're not really making a massive dent in terms of the overall, in terms of like your cost compared to what you might be spending on other things. So for example, a lot of companies spend a significant amount of money on marketing, or they roll out a big marketing campaign or something, and they don't think twice about that when there's not a clear return on investment per se. It's just like a gamble. They might be running a big brand campaign or something and hoping for the best. Whereas like localization is actually a key that unlocks many different markets. And so I think we as people in the industry need to do a better job of kind of advocating for this concept of the fact that the cost is really not that bad relative to other things that we might spend money on, and it gives us a stake at the table for not that much of an investment. I mean, if you think about an app and how many strings the average app might have, most apps aren't that big. It doesn't cost that much to get a language localized into the app. So the costs on aren't that bad when you think about it. So I think it's really relative. And obviously there are some companies, without a doubt, that have huge processing, limitations with their word counts and maybe millions of words a month. And that's a whole different ballgame because then you're talking about mega volume. But for the average app companies, which is kind of the perspective that I'm coming from, because many of the last companies I've worked with have been mostly B2C and some B2B applications, the costs are not as high as I think people might realize relative to other things.
That's specifically for software, your costs are likely to be much more severe in places that maybe don't sit on the localization line item. But if you have to have developers rework something, well, like a cheap loaded cost of a developer might be, let's say, 200,000 a year. Even when you consider offshore engineering, well, when I say offshore, I mean outside of the US, in cheaper markets. There's still a lot that goes into maintaining that developer there. So that expense is actually fairly high compared to, we went from, 16 cents a word to 15 cents a word. It's almost a ridiculous discussion, but all right, time to move on. What do you do to standardize quality? How do you manage terminology? Kind of a loaded question of both. Elizabeth, let me pick on you first.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a long list of things that we try to incorporate to ensure that we're standardizing quality. One of which is that we keep style guides up to date. So, this gives the vendor as well as our product team an opportunity to ensure that they're on the same page as far as style guide goes, as well as the global glossary of terms. So our global glossary is constantly being maintained and updated as updates and features roll in for each of our products. We're constantly updating the global glossary to reflect those changes. So we work directly with our vendor to ensure that they're aligned with our product development. And we also are beginning to incorporate some internal translation reviews. So, of course, we have our vendor who has their own process of standardizing and ensuring that quality is up to where it needs to be prior to delivering over our translations. But now we're also going to be incorporating an internal review with some internal stakeholders who also will get the opportunity to view the translations in context and give any feedback to ensure that we're where we need to be prior to anything being released. So I would say that's just a couple of things that we do to ensure that quality is standardized.
Got it. Anything for you to add, Andy?
Yeah, echoing a lot of what Elizabeth said. I mean, I think it's similar at each company. Like at Brave, we do the same kind of things from an approach. We have a global glossary in as many languages we support. We do have a style guide, and we have the guardrails in place to make sure that we can try to keep things as consistent as possible. I think when it comes to attention to detail, I think as you get more languages, it's really hard to pay full attention to every single language that you support. And so I think you really have to kind of pick and choose. I mean, we can't do a full app review on all 50 languages that we support every single time we release. But we can spot check. We can pull our top, markets that we have, good user base in or something like that, and we can review those things. So it's a combination of, what you can resource. At Brave, I'm doing as Elizabeth is herself. I'm doing everything from this side right now. So there's no other, people basically resources to divide up that work. So it's a lot to put on smaller teams. And so as one thing that we've looked into and have done some in the past is getting in some kind of automated QA checks, whether it goes through kind of an AI format where it's checking for specific things. You have, obviously your whatever tooling every company has, you have the warnings in place or whatever for things that may be off or maybe not standard for the company or terminology's off or something. And then I think long term, I think there are some really great things you can put in place, like automated screenshots, which I've done before, where you basically can take screenshots of the product itself and have people review it and just look for things to fix and go ahead and assign bugs, create bugs automatically or something, and put them in the system, get them fixed, whether it's a linguistic bug or a technical error or something like that. So, but basically very similar to what Elizabeth is doing, is what we're doing at Brave at the moment.
You know, I'm going to give my own company a plug in that later in June, maybe even next week, but we'll see. We're down to the last few bugs. We're going to have a release that we've supported context for web apps for a while, but for mobile and other areas, we are greatly expanding our context collection capabilities, and that not only collects the picture of what the UI is and where but it actually has string relation so that you see from string to string, like you would in like other documents, you actually see where it is on the screen that you're translated, as well as, you know, the problem with a screenshot is that you don't necessarily see some modal window that pops up that's conditional. So, you know, click here and then, you know, this changes, and like we're covering all of that. It's super cool. And it's also lightweight so that you don't end up with, you know, 20 screenshots for every screen, because that's how the UI kind of develops. You actually end up with one HTML serve screen for everything. So as you go from screen to screen, it's less intensive on either the TMS or the translator workbench that they're actually in. It's cool stuff, but it's not out yet. So I'm sort of stealing my own thunder, but you know, hey, that's okay. We'll have a webinar on that on the 19th. So anyway, let's go to the next one here. Let's get into the testing process a little bit. You know, actually, you already talked about this a little bit, so we may be able to skip this, but do you have anything to add? Like, are you using pseudo localization or, you know, anything like that?
I can comment on that. Yeah, I mean, we do some pseudo localization for specifically for things like design mockups and other areas that are kind of like quick checks. And I think there's also kind of that feedback loop when we're in the design phase. And we're a pretty agile company, so there's a lot of quick conversations that happen, and then people get to it right away. And so a lot of times in those conversations, we talk about you know, what would it be like from a different language perspective, or how would this go, whatnot. And I think so we do a lot on the front of the development cycle, and then when it comes to testing post, we don't have like a very robust post launch testing process at this point, primarily just because it hasn't been high on the needs yet. But we are definitely implementing different things as we go, like in terms of you know, just quality control checks and in-app reviews, and other kind of standard industry practices, but we're not fully there yet at the moment. So
Got it. Anything to add, Elizabeth?
Well, I'll say, I mean, I'm not heavily involved in the testing process, like post translation, but I do know that the development teams are, obviously they don't know the languages, so they're not able to give us feedback from that point of view. But if there's anything that looks off, so the way that the text is showing up on the screen or anything, they'll definitely give us that feedback. I know that they probably do have like a very, you know, set in stone process that they work in. I'm just not 100% familiar with what exactly is involved in it. But I'm involved when there's an issue or a bug that shows up, then they'll reach out to me and let me know, hey, we found this. Can you please, you know, look into it and let us know if this is intentional or if it's something that needs to be resolved. So that's kind of where I sit in the process, in the testing process.
yeah, and I should add, we do have QA that goes in the app. It is typically more on the technical side, but they do also do linguistic checks as well. So that is a part of our process. QA is pretty robust, but it's usually a lot more of the like, is this working? Is it functional? Can I, you know, that kind of stuff. But we do, same as Elizabeth, get feedback like this seems off in a language or something. So I'll take those on myself and spearhead the fixes.
Very good. All right. Um, how are you? You know, this is definitely not the AI webinar, which might be a relief to a lot of people, but at this point. But how are you making use of machine technologies of any type?
So I'll start. I mean, and our vendor has been, working really good together with us and giving us insight into like what's out there and what's available as far as machine translation goes. For now, I know that within XTM, that's our translation and management system that we use to process all of our translations. Um, we we have different translation memories for our products. So depending on the product, when we receive a source file with updates for translation, our translation memory kind of keeps what was translated prior, and so it makes the translation process more efficient, because if there are terms or phrases or words that were previously translated for this product, the translator doesn't have to do that translation from scratch. They can just pull from the translation memory, and then of course in the review process they're ensuring that what was pulled fits and is in context. So I would say that's the extent, but we're definitely looking into getting into more machine translation as time goes on.
Yeah, and
You
from
might
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think from our end, we're definitely using it in certain areas of the business. I think one of the interesting things about the AI and machine learning space is that I think there are a couple things to call out. I think one is that even if the language models can do the work theoretically, when in terms of translation, or they can kind of go from one to the other, it doesn't always mean that the quality is the same across all languages. And then I think to add to that, it's also not doesn't always necessarily fit into your workflow. There are obviously APIs and there are other things that can plug into CAT tools. We are working on with Crowdin at the moment for some of our workflows, and in order to do that, we do have APIs in order to implement the machine technologies. I mean, we leverage some APIs and we've used them for different workflows, but we have a lot of different types of projects at Brave. We have in-app things, we have website, we have marketing materials, we have all kinds of legal things, whatever. And in that, you have so many different types of content that you have to basically get into scripting for all these different things. You have to tailor your approach and the project specifically to that. So I think everyone's kind of in a learning phase at the moment about how to use these technologies efficiently. And then also, when is it not take up more work? Like for example, I've definitely done some things using machine translation or some kind of AI implementation, and had linguists review it, like maybe an internal contractor or something. And when they did, the amount of time that it took them to review it almost made it to where it wasn't that cost effective for us to do the machine translation of the AI, because basically they were spending hours reviewing things and correcting things, and maybe the tone of voice was off, or maybe they were using words inconsistently, and it just takes a lot of editing time. And so I think there's a lot of hype on AI, as everyone on the call is very aware. And I think that there's definitely use cases for AI already, and I think there's going to continue to be even more of them in the near future, going forward. I think over time, though, it's going to be the implementation of these into the workflow that makes it kind of interesting. And I think that's where we're at now, is like figuring out how to actually plug it in a meaningful way and get it to be scaled. And so we're doing that at Brave, and I know that many other industry colleagues seem to be doing similar things.
Yeah, you can bet that we're testing a lot on that line here within our own product development efforts and R&D efforts, but that's for another conversation. All right, I'm going to move on here. There we go. How do you cover the need? And I got to say, this is something that one of the people who received the mailer for our webinar, this is something that they asked. So I thought it was a great question. I was like, that's got to be on the list. How do you cover for the need for being culturally smart for each country's culture? Andy,
I can.
you first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I think the need to be culturally smart is important because obviously it's a nuanced approach, right? I mean, we look at things as macro languages, as like English speaking, quote unquote, or whatever. And we've seen in the past there are many case studies that show where just because two people speak the same language from different countries, the product doesn't necessarily work properly. You know, like if you, I mean, big examples, right? Like Starbucks or something in Australia, that's like a classic one, or I think it was like Dr. Pepper or something. That's another famous case. And obviously, those aren't linguistic, but just products in general, where people came in with this mindset of one country, one language, or you know, this kind of thing for the world. This approach. When we think about that on a product level, it's interesting because sometimes we have limitations, right? From a budgetary perspective, we have limitations from you know what the needs are of the product itself from that perspective. So I think there are obviously legal hurdles, there are marketing hurdles, there are linguistic hurdles, all that. I think for younger companies, I think it's really difficult for any company not to just focus on macro languages like an English, Spanish, or Portuguese, whatever. But as you become more involved, I think you still need this kind of core approach where you have maybe the one language covered, but then you need your really top level marketing content and your top level product initiatives to be done on a country level. And sometimes that's critical to the product's success, actually, because sometimes maybe a product needs to be marketed a certain way in a specific country, or maybe in one country it's illegal, or you know something depending on the product. There are a lot of different products out there, and so I think that the need is definitely there for a global company. And I think not all companies are global. Obviously, not all products are. So I think it's very dependent on that. Brave is a global company in the nature of it, and we do have users in pretty much every area as far as you know the major markets are concerned. We have a lot of different languages coming in, and it's difficult to scale every single country's language in all of our channels because you know we have a pretty massive website. Our website is huge, has many different pages and subpages. But in our product, we can still get to custom tailored approach, and the same thing with marketing materials, like for the app stores or things like that. So it is a need, and I think the answer to the question is challenging because it depends on the product and how many resources you have. Obviously, if you're a company that has unlimited resources, which many don't anymore, right? But you would want to focus on the depth, and you would want that message to really resonate with every single language. Like if you have a French for France, but you also have one for Switzerland, and you also have one for Canada, or at least you're tailoring kind of the marketing message to that. I mean, people notice those things. And if you're just using a mass market approach with a language, it's usually not going to resonate as well as it would if it was fully localized. And so I think as you grow as a company and markets become more significant in terms of your overall business model, I think it's really important to start tailoring your messaging, tailoring your product when you can. And sometimes from a product side, you are able to do market level customizations. And sometimes maybe regional. So for example, maybe you develop a product feature for a specific country or a specific region, and you have it kind of maybe behind a feature flag or something where you're able to turn it on and off depending on the country. And so you can basically look at the world of in your data and say, these countries, these 100 countries, this is not a relevant feature, and we do not want this live. But then in the other, another 20 countries or something it is, and then another group, maybe it's another cohort is maybe a potential, or it's like a temporary thing or something. So I think setting up the infrastructure to be able to do that is the most important part, because not all companies have the infrastructure to tailor on a country level. So that's kind of what I would say about that. But when you do have it, I think it's definitely impactful and meaningful to get customized to that point.
Elizabeth, your case is a little bit more extreme just because it's medical related software. And so a mistranslation can do quite a bit of damage. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, cultural adaptation culture, making sure that things are done in a culturally smart way is like top tier priority for us, and it's where we get a lot of our feedback. I think we're going to get into feedback and where, what languages we get the most feedback for. But typically those are the consistent, like that's the consistent category that we get feedback in, is the cultural aspects of how things were translated. So yeah, it's super important from an industry perspective. And when we go back to the conversation of ensuring localization is considered early in the software development lifecycle, when it comes to the design steps, when the product team is designing their products or their features, it's important for them to also have that in mind, that if we're going to be localizing this product or this feature for a ton of different countries and languages, then we need to ensure that the design is flexible enough to be able to adjust depending on what language it's being presented in. So that's super important. That's a super important component. And then I'll, of course, everything Andy said was like spot on. So I won't add too much more, but yeah, it's definitely key.
Yeah, so it's like Spanish, which Spanish, English, which
Right.
English.
And
Yeah.
we definitely do a ton of variations of like country to language combinations. So yeah, we have Spanish for Spain, we have Spanish for US, so, and
Right.
there's slight, differences in how those should be presented to the user. So
One,
yeah.
yeah, one thing if I can add too, just something that Elizabeth just said made me remember something. But in experimentation and testing, I do a lot of experimentation in my role. And one of the things that I found interesting too is that um, when you actually localize on a country level, it can make an actual impact and difference noticeable in data. Like for example, whether it's an app store experiment or whether it's a terminology experiment on your website, like for maybe a conversion rate or something, or in other areas, potentially in an ad campaign or whatever, you can actually see sometimes differences in the performance when it's on a country level, and that's quite interesting too. And there's definitely a difference between if someone was writing from Brazil and someone was writing from Portugal and you tried to use the same messaging or vice versa, the word choice, as Elizabeth mentioned, a lot of like the words you use in different countries could be completely different to describe the same thing. And that actually can turn someone off and say, oh, this looks like it's for Brazil or something like that, or it looks like this was a Portuguese person that wrote that, or they do notice those things. So it's an interesting topic.
All right, good. Follow-on question that Elizabeth alluded to, because I told him I was going to ask this. Where do you get the most negative feedback from? Well, it could be positive, but that like never happens. So what languages get the most feedback from stakeholders?
Um,
Elizabeth.
So yeah, so I'll jump in, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, how we're about to pilot like an internal review process for our Japanese language. So all of our products are translated into Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And then there are specific products that have more languages. So like our Patient Cloud suite that's the suite of products that's translated into over 100 languages. But Chinese, Japanese, and Korean are vital for us. And I would say the Japanese language probably gets the most constructive feedback. And so because of that, like I mentioned, we're looking into incorporating an internal review. So we have a team of Japanese internal stakeholders that we're working with, who are also going to give things a look at, prior to release. So they'll be able to take a look at the translations in context as well. And that'll hopefully, start to decrease the amount of feedback that we're getting in Japanese, because they have the past experience of feedback that they've received from the client, so they know what the client is looking for, so they can hopefully help us bypass having to go back after the fact and fix things. So yeah, but Japanese for sure.
Okay, Andy, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think languages. I think Japanese is always a language that gets a lot of attention. I think as many people in this industry would recognize, the bar for quality is quite high in the market, and there's an expectation that associated with that the imperfections are not necessarily well received inside of a user interface or website or anything. But additionally for us, I think it doesn't, it's not, it also comes down to like UI in terms of length of language a lot, not so much about the quality, but you know, like we get a lot of feedback sometimes for like Russian and a few other languages where it tends to be obviously a lot longer than English might be. And so there are like buttons inside our app that maybe appear broken or something because the way we decided to localize a term was just way longer than it needed to be, or maybe there's a shortened version that we need to use, abbreviated version. So that's another one for us. And then historically, I think we probably were, you know, with languages like French, which is, you know, a pretty common language, but making sure that that one was standardized and not using different forms. We actually had one rare case, sorry to add this on here, but we had one interesting case for Serbian with script, which was unique because obviously Serbian has different scripts that it can use, either Cyrillic or Latin based. And I realized that we had some mixed script within our experience, and that was a bit of an interesting thing to fix because basically the app and one of the areas of our business, one of the apps was kind of just a mixed experience. If you had like, you know, Cyrillic and Latin all kind of like jumbled together. And so it was something that we needed to address, which was kind of interesting to do without trying to relocalize the entire experience, which was fun. So that was another one. But yeah, in general, similar with those that I mentioned.
All right, very good. All right, I'd like to, at this point, move over to some audience questions. We have one on the Q&A interface. Kate, are you seeing any on LinkedIn Live?
Nope, but I'll let you know if I have something.
All right. The first question is, are you using Lingoport through your agencies? I'm actually going to take that to myself. Generally, it takes an act of God to get marketing permission to have any kind of an endorsement of a product at many companies. So I'll help a little bit out. First of all, everything Lingoport does is on the software repository side. While we connect with all these resources from vendor portals to TMSs to MT engines and AI engines, actually everything we do is code related, although it's increasingly localization oriented. Our localizer product is all about that, but it's all about software repositories. So it's sometimes we sell through an agency, but that's the minority. Mostly people use Lingoport locally. We have cloud instances, but not, I would say most clients end up installing some aspects of our software internally just because it's in the repo or where software is written. So it's very close to the intellectual property of that company. And that's actually a real advantage for us in many cases. It's like super fast to onboard repos and the like. Elizabeth is a Lingoport customer. Andy is not. But to me, I don't judge whether somebody's a guest based on them being a customer. So I hope that answers your question. That's the only question I have so far. Anything else? Otherwise, we're actually going to finish early. So going once, going twice. Anything on LinkedIn Live, Kate? Anything there?
Nope, nothing, sorry.
Okay. All right, good. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate Andy and Elizabeth, your participation. Elizabeth, I'll drop you an email about that coffee next Friday when I'm in
Okay,
your area.
sounds good.
And Andy, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. It's still daylight where you are in Turkey, so I'm glad you have an evening ahead of you. thanks for participating, and it's been great. Take care, everyone.
Having us.
There you
Oh, and
go.
we have another webinar on the 19th. Go to lingoport.com, resources, webinars, and you'll see it. Actually, it might be in the banner, but that's going to be all about context, and we're going to be doing that with our partners at RWS. So that should be pretty cool. A little more technical also. All right. Thank you, everyone.
There you go.